about temporary site lighting and why getting it right is so much more than just flipping a switch. It's actually all about precise engineering. So let me just ask you this, straight up. When the sun goes down, is your work site really safe? I mean, think about it. We're talking about all those hidden dangers that pop up in the shadows, trip hazards, materials you didn't see, blind spots for equipment operators. All that stuff can lead to some really serious consequences. And this right here, this gets to the absolute core of the problem. So many sites just install lighting. They put up the towers, turn them on, and call it a day, without ever checking if they actually comply with international standards. It feels like a small thing, but it's an oversight that can and does put lives at risk.
All right, so to get this right, we've got to start with the rules of the game. Let's dig into the key standards that actually define what safe lighting even means. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This looks like a lot of technical jargon, right? But what you're really looking at is a complete safety system. You've got your EN standards for how bright things need to be, IEC standards to make sure the electrical setup is safe, and of course, OSHA as a kind of global benchmark. The key is that they all work together to make sure a site isn't just bright, but that it's also electrically sound and, fundamentally safe for everyone there.
But hey, if you're only going to remember one of these when it comes to brightness, make it this one, EN 12464-2. That's the main technical reference. It's the go-to guide that engineers use to figure out exactly how bright a work area has to be safe and compliant. This is the big one.
Okay, but knowing the standards is only half the battle. It doesn't mean a thing if you're measuring the wrong thing. And that brings us to a really common and honestly a pretty dangerous misconception, the whole myth of wattage versus lux. And this quote, man, it just cuts right to the heart of it. It says lighting requirements are not based on lamp wattage, but on illuminance measured in lux. And that, it says, is a critical distinction. Basically, just because a lamp has high wattage doesn't mean your site is safe. The only thing that really matters for safety is lux. So let's break this down because it's super important. Think of it like this. Wattage is just the power going in. It's how much electricity the bulb is eating up. But lux, that's the light coming out. It's the actual measurable amount of light that's hitting the ground or the work surface. And that's the one we care about. To put it another way, lux, or illuminance, that's the technical term, it's just a measure of how bright a surface actually looks to a person. It takes everything into account, the lamp's power, sure, but also how high it is, what angle it's at, everything. It is the only real way to measure if a space is safely lit. All right, so we know what we need to measure. Now let's get practical and figure out how. We're actually going to walk through a pretty simple calculation to see exactly how many lights you need for a typical site. But wait, before we jump into the numbers, there's a crucial point here. It's not just about how bright the lights are, it's about how uniform the lighting is. You've got to overlap the coverage to kill those dangerous dark zones between lights. You want to use a cross-aiming strategy so the light is spread out evenly. And for heaven's sake, you can't aim the lights right at your equipment operators and blind them with glare. Okay, so the process itself is pretty straightforward. It's basically 4 steps. First, figure out the total light output of one tower. Second, you calculate the area it should cover in a perfect world. Third, and this is key, you apply a little reality check. And finally, you just divide your site's total area to see how many towers you actually need. Easy enough, right? All right, step 1. Let's start with a standard mobile light tower. Most of these have 4 lamps, and each one pumps out about 35,000 lumens. So you do the math, that gives us a grand total of 140,000 lumens to start with. Now, if you plug that number into the standard formula, you'll find that, theoretically, in a perfect little vacuum with no dust or anything in the way, that one tower could light up 900 square meters. But we all know construction sites are anything but a perfect world, right? And here is that all-important reality check. Because we need that overlap to get rid of blind spots, we have to apply a reduction factor. So we knock about 22% off that theoretical number. That brings our practical coverage area down to 700 square meters per tower. That little reduction, that's your safety margin. That's what makes the site truly safe. Okay, let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Let's imagine we've got a work area that's, say, 60 meters long by 40 meters wide. Simple math there. That gives us a total of 2,400 square meters that we need to light up properly. That's our goal. And now for the last step. We just do some simple division. We take our total site area, the 2,400 square meters, and we divide it by the 700 square meters that each tower can actually cover. And that gives us 3.43.
Now, obviously, you can't set up 0.43 of a light tower, so you always round up to the next whole number. So for this particular site, you need a minimum of 4 tower lights, spaced out correctly to make sure the entire area is safely and compliantly lit.
So there you have it. We've done the math. But what's the big picture payoff here? Why go through all this trouble instead of just, guessing? Let's talk about the benefits. And really, the benefits are huge. When you take the time to do the calculation, you're not just guessing. You're dramatically improving safety and visibility for your workers. You're also ensuring you're meeting all those legal and regulatory standards. And what does all that lead to? A more productive, more efficient work environment for everybody on site. This last quote really ties it all together beautifully. It reminds us that proper lighting design isn't just about making things bright. It's about creating that uniform, glare-free light that lets people do their jobs not just efficiently, but safely. And that's the whole point.
So we'll leave you with this one final question to think about for your own projects. When it comes to working after dark, is your lighting plan based on actual engineering, or is it just guesswork? Because that answer, well, it can make all the difference in the world.